Hello and welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast on the internet that has the science and the screaming to determine what is the single greatest movie of any given year. This season, of course, is 1984, and we're discoing, we're electric boogalooing that year all season. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host of tonight's show. The show is, as always, a film analysis / game show, so everyone will be trying to get points as they talk. You can get points by making great points about the movie, complimenting me, film trivia maybe, but mostly the compliments. We have 3 illustrious panelists tonight. From Southern California, it's Greg.
Hey, it's me, Ryan. Thank you for saying I'm illustrious. I really appreciate that. I don't exactly know what it means, but it feels good.
Pick one trait of yours, physical or personality-wise, that you believe is the most illustrious.
My calves, I think, I think we're on record as saying that I've got,
known.
My body is basically a complete disaster, and then there's just, this beautiful set of calves on it, the least important part of the entire human body. Mine just happened to be perfect, but it
Girls
really does
don't care,
nothing
but
for
boys
me.
love calves for some reason. Coming in from Denver, it says writer. It works for GQ, The Ringer, Vulture, TV Guide, Rolling Stone, and The Reveal. Mike, is that your resume?
I think a couple people's resumes might have gotten confused, but yeah, we'll go with all of that.
I had a big stack of resumes, and I turned a corner, and I ran into someone, and all the resumes flew up in the air. And then what? Okay, so what are you from?
You cut them up and glued them?
Yeah.
I am in Denver.
Oh, so that was the correct part. Okay. And then I'm going to guess that from GQ, The Ringer, Vulture, TV Guide, Rolling Stone, and The Reveal, it's Keith Phipps. Are you here?
That's me. That's me, Keith Phipps. Right
okay, so that is your resume. Keith, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's exciting to talk about this film and 1984 in general.
I wanted to get you on this season, and you chose this movie because you said that you were going to see it in theaters. Did that turn out to be true?
It did. Yeah, I spent a whole long Friday watching this. I do really like this movie, and I'm eager to talk about it. But it happened to be a nice coincidence. Yeah, it had not screened in Chicago, I think, in 20 years. And so the Music Box, which is a wonderful art house theater here, had a screening of it. And they talked about how they ordered the print from Disney, and they're like, "Are you sure this is the one you want?" I mean, it's 20 reels. It's 20 reel version is the one they wanted.
And I mean, what a way to see it, not just because theaters are awesome, but you can't hit pause. You can't say, I'll finish this tomorrow, which I think a lot of people do. So Keith, I know that you're a fan. Let's get to Mike and Greg. Did you guys like this movie? Is this your first Leone?
This is my first Leone, and I'm just gonna
Is it your last?
I'm gonna pull the Band-Aid off, and I'm gonna say this one is going in the Grouchy Greg files. This movie made me grumpy, it made me cranky, and it made me grouchy for all the reasons that I normally complain about movies on this podcast. And so I'm just gonna sit in awareness of that. I had not seen it. My parents once rented it, and we watched a little bit of it together, and it got to the scene, the first bathroom scene, and they were like, "You got to get out of here, kiddo. This is not for you."
And they packed your bags, and you had to run away.
Yeah, they made me move out right away. It was upsetting, but they were like, if this is what having a slightly older child than you is going to be like, we can't face it. We're not going to do it.
We don't want
no part of that.
Mikey, what'd you think?
I've did the last 2 of his Dollars trilogy a bunch in my teens and early 20s. I don't know why I didn't ever watch the first one. But I know I did A Few Dollars More and The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. This is my first time viewing this. And is this everything a movie should be? Is one guy said, what if we do everything a movie... I mean, it's because it's 4 fucking hours long. But he just decided to have one movie do everything a movie can do.
The problem with most movies is that they're just about part of somebody's life. What if we did the entire life? We made the whole
not in
movie
order.
out of the life.
You got... Turn it into a jigsaw and shoot it that way.
Yes.
Shoot it that way. Make it feel like you started with the wrong reel when the movie starts.
Yeah.
And then perhaps something... Go ahead.
I heard that the editor, when they had 20 reels in their hands to edit, and they ran into somebody turning around a corner, and all the reels went in the air. I think that I am somewhere between Grumpy Greg, who is now folded his arms for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Like that's just it. His arms are crossed.
They're so crossed.
And Mike and Keith, I appreciate so much about this movie. And I cannot wait to dive in with you guys, but I can't say if I'm at Mike's level of. I mean, like, do you think this is one of the best movies we've ever covered, Mike?
Yes. In the not just in 1984, which would only be like versus Gremlins and Repo Man, so not saying anything at all, but in the entirety of our show and in my life of movies I have seen, this is up in the top 10.
And Keith, as far as 1984 goes, where do you sort of rank this movie?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, between Repo Man and Gremlins, it's my favorite. But I do love both those movies too. What is the sort of like default best movie of 1984?
Paris, Texas.
What is the Paris? Yeah,
Amadeus.
I do love Paris, Texas. I have a real deep affection for this movie, in part because it is rough around the edges. It's like one of those flawed masterpieces where I think the flaws make it more interesting to talk about than more perfect movies in many ways. So and there's difficult stuff. I'm sure we'll get into as well. It's a rich text. It's a weird Leone to come to first because it is the genre he doesn't work in. He's never worked in before. It's a decade he's never worked in before, never worked in again because he died not too long after this. It's very recognizable as his movie, but it's also him doing things that he hasn't done, anywhere else. So it's kind of. I mean, I would recommend seeing this after other Leone movies, but that's
that ship has sailed.
I think it's okay
Keith.
if you don't. Yeah, I know. Too late. Sorry.
Well, did you at least picture Greg? Like an early one while you were watching this one?
I read the script of a few dollars more.
All right, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, let's dive into Once Upon a Time in America. Intent on making a trilogy about America that would be as infamous as his trilogy about a man with no name, Sergio Leone directed movies about Americans in 1968 and 1971. But it wasn't until 1984 before the Italian master could wrap up his trilogy and his career with Once Upon a Time in America. Leone was finally able to make his dream project, a movie based on the book The Hoods. And when all was said and done, he was able to cut his film down to an easy-peasy 10 hours. After a couple more cuts, he would be able to get it down to 6 hours and asked the studio if he could release it in 2 parts. The studio, of course, said, "Who are you, Kevin Costner? What is this, Horizon Parts 1 and 2? He eventually cut it down to 350, and then the producers cut it down to 2 hours. 40 years later, the 3 hours and 50-minute version has become the norm, and the movie has become a cinematic classic. The movie tells the story of 4 friends growing up in New York who go from street crimes to the big time. But it's really about love, violence, masculinity, power, and so much more. Taste buds, I ask you this. If the modern gangster picture has 3 heads on its Rushmore, Coppola, Scorsese, and Tarantino, does Leone deserve the 4th head? How does Leone here redefine or define the movie gangster?
I would say, even though this is his one, that yes, because I think it's hard to not think about the Godfather trilogy throughout watching this movie. And I feel like the Godfather, I like them because I was always told I should like them. They're very good, but I was just like, I don't get the fervor. And then I feel like my fervor is here. And so maybe it's what Keith was saying earlier, that this one is rougher around the edges, so you can like gnaw on it instead of like just sit back and be like. And when we say the Godfather trilogy, we mean 2. 1
yeah,
and
right.
2.
Nobody's like out there like repping for 3.
But yeah, I think his one movie certainly argues he should be up there. I don't even know who the 4th person would be.
Who made that Christian Slater gangster movie, Ryan? But Mobsters. That guy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you say, all right, so you're saying Scorsese, Coppola, you're looking for a 3rd? Or was there, did you have a 3rd?
Leone.
Oh, Tarantino. Okay, so as much as I love this movie, I think I would probably put De Palma on there. Because it's Scarface, but also Carlito's Way, which is I think it's one of his very best films, and I think one of the best meditations on the gangster movie and just sort of crime in America and American dream put to film. I love that movie. I think it's a little overlooked, perhaps less now than before, but it's that alone might be.
And he was also Untouchable, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course, Untouchables. Yeah. Yes.
Carlito's Way, that has Sean Penn playing Art Garfunkel, right? If I remember correctly. But like, I think that I guess my biggest concern here is that what Leone did to basically redefine and then debunk the Western genre, the cowboy, long before Clint Eastwood did it with Unforgiven. I feel like that there's a little bit working in reverse here, where all of the things that Scorsese is making amends for now with things like The Irishman, about the violence in the movie. This movie sort of blow that up and say, look how rad and awesome these guys are and what they do?
I would say
Oh,
no.
no, I don't think so at all. I think it's this movie is so sad. This is just.
I think it's
one long mournful.
It's about here
movie.
are these abandoned children who turn to violence and use, in a way, kind of the best parts of the American ethos. Like, if you think about it, when they get that $1 and then they decide instead of taking the $1, they're just going to get permission to mug one of the customers of the bar in a way that is like so quintessentially American, especially like American grind or hustle culture, that you ought to like defer money and instead accept like opportunity. But because these kids are so abandoned, they're using like this perverse sort of American ethos. And so we watch that potential just get like rot while it's right on the vine. And it doesn't come across as cool or sexy or neat for almost all of the movie. It comes across as just kind of like shady and dilapidated and gross, really, the lives that they're in.
I think one of the possibly the one time it comes off cool is that they're still kids, because that's the only time any of them look cool, is they invent the hide the
With
Coke
the salt?
with the salt. And that's just like great brain era. We're inventing things. We're scamps. That scene
Again,
is
though,
a
it's
delight.
a twisted perversion of that, right? That's like, it's even sicker because it's like, damn, this is a really clever idea, and they have really like they've cracked something here. But instead of that being in the service of like a community, it is actively working to be detrimental to the community.
I guess.
The one cool moment I thought was when they first suited up as kids. So they're still like 12, 13 years old, but they're wearing full suits, which is when they like first do the suitcase for the very first time. They're all suited up. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tone set by the beginning. I think that opening scene, the violence is so ugly in that, and we don't even know what's going on. It's just sort of we're just seeing this horrific act of violence and have to put together the context later. And no, I don't think there's a lot of romanticization of violence in this movie.
What is Leone in love with then? Like, what is the romantic part that drew him to the story besides just showing the shame? Is it New York?
I think he's got
is
like
it New York City that
a Keats version of a love of just truth. I think the sexuality he portrays is obscene and awful. The violence he portrays is not given any sort of sexy sheen. I think what he really loves and thinks is beautiful is he's saying this is what life is actually like. This is how the world is really made. So, it's beautiful because we're actually seeing reality.
And what, because Greg said like a perverse, twisted version of the American dream. I think his whole thing, both with the Westerns and now here, is saying, no, this is what it actually is. Any sort of American ingenuity has always been in service of vice and breaking other people. And they are forever intertwined.
And I think in terms of its conversation with other movies, it's not the equivalent of what he's doing with the Western, because I think a lot of that is just kind of adding grit and grime and taking away the romantic elements of it. I mean, the gangster films set in this era are always about how crime doesn't pay in one form or another. But I think it's a matter of like, well, this is the actual crime and this is the price. It's not just in terms of, sometimes you don't get gunned down by police in the final scene. Sometimes you just lose your soul and have to live with that loss. And that, I think, is a far greater punishment in many ways.
It's almost worse when crime
yeah,
does pay, right? Like, because ultimately crime totally pays for Maxie, and what he's left with is like, he feels like a worse punishment than if he had actually died early in the movie, because it's like he watches himself get completely hollowed out and become, like a non-entity, really. He changes his name. He changes his whole way of life. He kind of grabs onto everything that a friend of his loved and tries to do that. And so he just like erases himself.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, Maxie, isn't there just a Spirit Halloween store with a Robert De Niro mask that you can go buy and put on? But yeah, the whole delayed gratification thing of like more that starts with $1, and then they're on the beach and they're like, we have $10 million, I think, and we won't be happy until we have 50. That whole American thing is just there is no happiness. There is no coasting. And part of it is the American dream is that you can never be happy. But also, if you were happy for 1 second, then everything you've ever done will come back to you. You'll have a second to think about all of your, regrets and your shame and your awfulness, and that will gnaw at your soul, right?
Yeah.
Unless you turn to opium.
But, I mean, yeah, that's the thing is that they keep doing these crimes. It's almost like this salsa is hot. I better eat another bite of salsa to cool it off. They keep doing these crimes or the vices, crimes or vices, in order to just keep pushing that down the road of dealing with their sins.
And I mean, and that's exactly what's happening at the end of the movie, right? Maxie, the walls are finally fully closing in. He's going to be absolutely punished for everything he's done. And he still can't accept that. He wants to die instead of having to accept that, or disappear instead of having to accept that, because that's what they're doing. They're constantly trying to defer punishment for their sins, really, more than their crimes. Their sins against each other and against their community.
Let me ask you guys this. Does Noodles not kill Maxie at the end? Spoilers, by the way.
Light spoilers for the end of the 4-hour
We're going to
movie.
spoil Once Upon a Time in America. Does Noodles not kill... I'll go to you, Keith. Does Noodles not kill Maxie because Noodles has finally changed, or because I'm going to keep... This is the best punishment. I'm going to keep doing this to him?
I think it can be both. I mean, I don't know, though. I really don't think... I think, if anything, it's the latter, because I don't think this is a movie that presents a redemption for this character after a certain point of his actions kind of put him beyond forgiveness, and that's to me part of the strength of the movie. I'm sure we'll talk about that point and why in section 3, if not before.
Yeah, I mean, if you find yourself wanting Noodles to be redeemed because you want classic movie Hollywood structure, then what does that say about you? You want this guy to be the hero?
Yeah, he's certainly one of the grossest protagonists we've ever covered.
I also think that, in a way, it's the killing that when Noodles kills or just messes up Bugsy early on, and then that's, he also stabs a cop, and that's what he gets sent to jail for. It's like that's when he gets pulled away from his group of friends, and he no longer understands them anymore, because they are they're constantly, when he comes out of jail, they're constantly saying to him well, we don't know how you've changed, but he's very slowly realizing, oh man, these people have changed a lot, and he's trying to figure out how much they've changed. And so then the not killing at the end of everything is he's like, you know what, I have done that. I opened that door with this initial killing, and now I don't want to close it for you by doing that again. It's not like redemption. It's just I think just turning away from this cycle. It's neither redemptive nor is he still fully guilty. It's just he is taking himself kind of out of the game, and taking Maxie out of the game too, because then Maxie literally disappears from the movie, and then we're just we're done with it. Wherever he goes, I imagine at the end of the movie, if Noodles just stood there, eventually Maxie's gonna come out from behind a bush and be like, okay, I'm right over here, you dickhead. But instead he's no, he's gonna turn from him and just let him mysteriously disappear like this, because that's really ultimately what has happened anyways. Everything has sort of become undone at the end.
Yeah. The role of prison, Greg, is interesting in this movie, because we spend no time with Noodles while he is in prison, and yet I think it is one of the biggest things that happens in the movie. His taken away from the streets, from his friends, and then spending that time in there, that's when everything changes. And is there are we talking about something about how much prison can mess you up, or is it just a plot point? Noodles could have gone away to college and then came back, but he went to prison instead.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Noodles spends more of his life away from this gang than with them, but still defines everything he is in relation to the gang. When it's bro, you were a kid, and then you spent 12 years away from them. You were there for a couple of years, and then you spent 35 years away. Move on. Live your life, Noodles.
I mean, that's ultimately what he's unable to do, right? And that's what Deborah's whole thing seems to be. You're not being a person. You are just at the beck and call of somebody else, and all you care about is him. And it's why aren't you living your life? Why aren't you using this time that you have right now? Because he becomes defined by the time Noodles does. He becomes defined by the time where we don't see him. We don't see him in prison. We don't see him in Buffalo. And in a way, we those things should define him as much as the rest of this time. But because they don't, it's like we're left with, well, then who the hell is this guy really?
Yeah, I think though part of this movie is about how his only real life is the parts we see. Like the rest is like things that skip over because they don't really matter to him. Like
It's almost like
one of
the
my favorite
opium
moments
den.
in the. Yeah, exactly. And like one of my favorite moments in the movie is like I feel like, and this is obviously wrong, but in my memory, this movie has like 8 lines of dialogue and they're all perfect. and when he's asked, like, well, when Mo asks him like, what have you been doing? Where have you been? He's like, what have you been doing? He said something like, been going to bed early. And that's like all you need to know about how he's lived his life all those years. That's the only relevant detail.
He's just like in stasis. When we're not looking at him, it's almost like he doesn't even exist. He's just like in a holding pattern.
Do you guys sort of feel like that though too, where like when I'm not talking to the three of you, I'm just waiting to the next time I get to the podcast again, you know?
Yeah, you're just in your sleep pod, which is confusing. You're in your other pod. Your life is defined by pods.
That is unfortunately not a joke. We're going to take the quickest of breaks. And when we come back, we have to stop talking about Once Upon a Time in America because it's Once Upon a Time in America trivia time. Trivia. That's right. It is trivia time. Gentlemen, you know the rules. Wait for me to read the entire question and then say your name to buzz in. Keith will get extra points because he's a guest and he's here.
Cool.
Awatia, is that the best way to say it?
What's that?
Awatia?
Oh, I guess.
Awatia received no Oscar nominations. What is the probable reason for that?
Greg.
Greg.
Oh.
The Academy hates greatness and instead just celebrates popcorn movies.
Okay, well, I know that you don't think that's true because you didn't like this movie. Anybody else? Mike or Keith?
Mike.
I
apologize for instantly forgetting we're doing trivia. They
you
saw
blurted
the
out
shitty
1 second after I read the instructions. You blurted out your answer immediately.
They saw the shitty 2-hour version that was cut chronologically and somehow makes even less sense than the European version.
That is correct. The 2-hour version is what was turned into the Academy. What actor was told that he probably wasn't right for the role of Max, the best friend psychopath who flies off the handle when people call him crazy?
Greg. Dennis Hopper.
Oh, good one. That would be awesome.
That would be ironic, right?
Huh.
Mike. Al Pacino.
No, not the Dunkachino himself. Keith, you got a guess?
Keith, I just look at it. I know there's these people were up for, were being considered for. So I'm going to say Tom Berenger. I know he was in the running at one point.
Oh man, and Keith, do whatever research you want, just as long as it's not the IMDb trivia page, because that is where all.
I
of
just have
these
my notes I took before. Yeah.
No, it's Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci cannot pull off the role of the crazed.
I can't see it. He's too calm.
Yeah,
He's just a little guy. Come on.
He's really calm in this movie, though. It's a very
there's one scene
scary,
where he
quiet
just
performance.
Yeah, walks in and like looks around. I'm like, Pesci, good job. Which character's name in Once Upon a Time would Robert De Niro take for a future movie?
Keith, Max?
No. Oh, well, shit. Yeah, no? He might have. He's been in 100 movies, so probably all of these names. But no. What first and last name?
Oh.
Mike.
Yes.
Jimmy O'Donnell.
That is correct.
Nice.
It's Jimmy Conway in the movie, and that is who he plays in Goodfellas. Name an offer that Sergio Leone did in fact refuse.
Norman Mailer.
What?
Norman Mailer.
No, what?
An offer. Oh, I said an author. Offer. Oh no, I don't. Okay, I'll let someone else
Greg.
take that one then.
Yes.
Did he not? Did he decide not to direct The Godfather?
That is correct, and regretted it for the rest of, until 1984.
The way you asked gave me a slight clue.
Jennifer Connelly, who plays young Deborah, drew the attention of which director who would cast her in a movie we covered in our 1985 season? A movie from 1985.
Keith, Jim Henson?
No.
Greg.
That's what I was thinking as well.
Brian
Greg.
Henson?
No. Mike, I'm going to give you a hint. The last name is not Henson.
Damn it, I was going to say like
we
Ron
have run
Henson.
through the Hensons.
It is Dario Argento who put her in phenomenon or creepy crawlies. What was the American version?
I think it was creepy crawlies, right?
Where they based that toy on the creepy crawlies.
Next, how many times does the phone ring at the beginning of the movie? We'll do this Price of Right rules.
Okay, Greg.
I'm
going to say the phone rang 14 times.
Okay. Keith?
I'll say 16.
Mike?
It feels like infinite,
Yes.
though, doesn't
With the
it?
part where he picks up the phone and it keeps ringing is such a violation of the compact between directors and audiences.
I don't want to be a jerk and say 17, so I'll say 21.
24. Mike gets the point.
Wow. I think Keith was was functionally correct on that one. The phone is still ringing somewhere.
Infinite?
Yeah.
I hear it right
the
now.
Phone ring dimension.
Send it to voicemail, guys. Like, what are we doing? This movie includes 10 actors that were nominated for an Oscar. 4 of them won. Round robin until somebody loses. We'll start with Keith.
De Niro?
Yep. Mike?
Woods?
Yep. Greg?
Joe Pesci.
Keith?
ILO. Danny ILO.
Yep.
As himself. When he comes out and they go, Police Chief Aiello, it's like, wait, did he refuse to do this unless it was named after him?
Look, I'm not going to remember something like a character's name. Connolly.
Connolly, yep. Greg? Oh, no, Greg.
What's the name of I just can't remember I'm going to cheat. I'm cheating right now. Elizabeth McGovern?
Yep. The mom from Downton Abbey, right?
The mom from Downton Abbey.
Keith?
What did she win for? Or what was she nominated for? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I'm Tuesday Weld. Was Tuesday Weld nominated?
Tuesday Weld. There is 3 more, Mike.
William Forsythe.
And that is incorrect. Keith
Come
and
on,
Greg get the
Mike.
point.
You blew that so hard. I was ready.
That was a real piece of shit move, Mike.
Oh, my God. You blew that so hard.
No love for cockeye?
Louise Fletcher, Nurse Ratched, was in this movie from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Burt Young from Rocky has been nominated for an Oscar. And then producer Arnon Milchan was in this movie.
Of
and
course. Mike, is that who you
something.
meant?
That's who I meant.
Oh, for the record, she was nominated for Ragtime, which came out several years before this.
Oh, with James Cagney?
Mm-hmm.
This movie almost bankrupted the Ladd Company, founded by Alan Ladd Jr. What is Ryan's favorite Alan Ladd Sr. movie?
Keith. Shane?
Yeah, it is Shane. That is correct.
That's some good Ryan trivia there.
What is the one musical cue keeping Shane from being a perfect movie?
Mike.
Yes.
It's when, in the third act, when Shane walks in and Down with the Sickness starts playing. Come on.
I thought you were going to get that. That was so close. Greg or Keith, any ideas?
It's been a while for me for that one.
Anytime Shane walks into the room, it should go, Shane, like it does for Shaft. but it
Bad
doesn't.
mother.
You know Shane. This is one of 3 movies that Pesci and De Niro appeared in together that Scorsese did not direct. Who directed the other 2 films?
Keith. De Niro directed one of them.
That means he directed both of them. Keith gets
Okay,
the
all right.
point. Bronx Tale and The Good Shepherd. Both the actors that played Noodles and Cockeye went on to play the same famous gangster and the same famous boxer. Name both.
Greg.
Jake
LaMotta is the boxer.
Yes.
And then I'm supposed to say gangster.
Famous gangster that they both played.
Al Capone.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Greg takes
Nice.
that shit down.
Man, you could see me just ultimately just knowing those, not even having to guess, just saying them right off the top of my head.
What movie title do I always accidentally say when referring to this movie?
Greg.
Once
Upon a Tale in America.
Incorrect.
Mike.
Mike?
An American Tale 2, Five Goes West in America.
Incorrect. Keith?
I'm going to say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That is correct.
Always,
Every
Ryan, that
single
movie
time.
just came out.
What is Sergio Leone's best movie that starts with the words Once Upon a Time?
Greg.
Greg?
Once Upon a Time in the West.
That is correct.
Yeah.
What would this movie be called if Noodles was played by Bart Simpson's bully?
Once upon a time in Springfield.
Greg, Mike, say your name.
Mike.
And you're wrong. That's time. It's Once Upon a Time in America. What would this movie be called if Noodles was played by NFL player Shane Leckler? Time's up. Punts Upon a Time in America. He's a punter. What would this movie be called if Noodles was played by Simon and Garfunkel?
Greg.
Time's up. Greg.
Wait, what were you gonna say? Right?
That's not how
I didn't
trivia
mean
works,
to
Greg.
interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, whatever you're saying is my answer probably.
Oh wait, I got it. I got it. Once upon a time in an American town. American tune.
No, so close.
Nope. All right, fine.
Once Upon a Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Time in America. What would this movie be called if Noodles only gave monologues about Barbie?
Once upon a time, Greg.
Yes.
Once upon a time in America, Ferrera.
That is correct, Greg. Good job. Just two more, guys. We're almost done here. What would this movie be called if Noodles fucked up the beats during his set at Coachella?
Mike. Once upon a Grimes in America.
That is correct, Mike. And finally, what would this movie be called if Noodles was played by a cake baked in a specific circular shape?
Oh, Mike. Bunts a time in America.
Once Upon a Time in America. I'm going to give
Bunts
you that,
upon
Mike.
a time in America. Thank you. I forgot some of the words.
That is movie trivia. And when we come back, let's get maybe back into the movie that we're talking about. This movie really takes off when Lil Noodles gets a little bit scammed by a new kid on the back of a car named Maxie. Despite being the story of men in violence, men and women, men in crime, and men in the big city, isn't this actually just the story of Noodles and Maxie?
It does feel that way. I think it's very interesting. The very first thing they do when they interact with each other is Maxie steals the guy that they're going to mug. That totally sets the tone for the rest of their relationship. And the next thing they do together is they steal a watch back and forth from each other. But yeah, I mean, I think that at the moment that happens, you realize that as the viewer of the movie, you realize a lot of this has been preamble to introduce these two characters. But why it's necessary is because you get to see kind of how as a young guy, Noodles is already fully formed. He's already a little adult and he's already in command. And then you watch Maxie come in and just be like, I'll take it from here, big guy. Why don't I just become in charge now?
And it's the one person, Little Noodles, as we'll now call him, Lil Nunu, will actually
Which is just rice, as we all know.
Respect is Maxie. But yeah, their whole friendship is defined by not just competition, but undermining each other from the stealing to the stealing of the watch to Max pretends to be dead just to watch Noodles declare that he does care about him, to much later in life Max once again pretends to be dead. They're not good friends, guys. They're not good friends to each other.
But it's also, I think it's really easy to see this as kind of an ugly love story. I mean, I don't think the subtext is these people are actually sexually attracted to each other, but they're kind of defined
they fuck in a
by
lot
the
of
relationship
situations
to one
where,
another.
they are together. They're not fucking each other, but they are fucking in adjacent locations.
Precisely that, and in some ways, Deborah is not part of that. I think Deborah is Max's way out, and he does it, and sort of the one person offering an opportunity to have a life that's not this grimy, self-destructive or just destructive existence, and ultimately that's not a possibility anymore.
But what does Maxie do every time Noodles and Deborah are with each other?
Oh, I meant Noodles. I'm sorry. I meant Noodles before. Noodles way out. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, every time when they were kids, when they're adults. I mean, she has a catchphrase in this movie. Your mother wants you, or whatever she says. Because every time they're together, Maxie will find a way to interrupt it because Maxie knows that's Noodles' way out. And Maxie knows that it's possible that Noodles will put Deborah higher on the shelf than Maxie. And he interrupts as often as he can to the ultimate point, the ultimate interruption, marrying her.
Yeah, because he sees what Maxie sees that for Noodles, Deborah is spiritually his way out. she is like pure and beautiful, and he wants to possess that, and she stays out of it. I mean, she kind of like, she chooses as a little girl to like not go out into the world that often and just stay inside the property that her family owns and like work on developing herself. And so she stays a part of everything, and she's constantly commenting on how Noodles is like a dirty street urchin, and like and so she becomes this like purity that he can aspire to. And I think it's just that aspiration that Max wants to like take over. I think he can't help but try to take everything from the people, even the people that he loves. Like, I think this movie is an examination of how like it doesn't mean that he loves Noodles any less, or that they're not actually friends, but that those two things can exist, where it's like, I love you and I like being with you, but I also want to take every single thing from you.
Yeah. Love is not inherently good. This is real love, and it is twisted and about control.
Yeah, you know, it sounds weird, but we romanticize love, especially in popular culture, as like this pure thing. But love, for a lot of people, is an extremely selfish thing. And we like try to strip that love out of our definition of love. But as human beings, as passionate beings, that's just not how it works. Oftentimes, the things we love the most are the things that we are the worst to, and we ask the most of, not the other way around. The things that we serve are not the things that we love the most. It's the things that we take for granted tend to be the things that we love the most. But and I think that connects to the gross sort of sexuality of the movie, which I think we're still going to get to. But this is connected to that issue because it reminded me of, remember that line of Repo Man, Ryan? Like, straight guys like to watch their buddies fuck. Like, this feels like that line went out and made a movie, and this is the movie. I can't believe how much time they spend like having sex near each other, like taking turns having sex with the same woman. Like, it seems to be that there is this sexual component to their relationship, but they've just found a way to like channel it so that it's not explicitly homosexual.
I mean, Tuesday Wells' character.
It finds a medium of expression, and that's other women that they share.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Just like their thrones or their money, you know, that briefcase that they all have, that they all pitch into, that's everything, and that includes other people. Tuesday Wells' character, who is raped during a bank robbery and then becomes a hooker and then ends up with Maxie. The first time they see her again after the robbery, she is clearly going for a threesome with Maxie and Noodles. And she touches Noodles' crotch, and Noodles' like, I'm not about this. And everybody's like, oh, whoa, bud.
Think you're better than this?
Like, is this? Why would you not be into this?
It's interesting and kind of shows that Noodles was always going to have to be the gang member who gets pushed out or leaves, because from the very first, and why she is just a briefcase to them, from that first briefcase scene, all there, and their little buddy hasn't even been shot yet, they're all in. And Noodles is like, share. Fuck you guys. And then finally gets like, fine, I'll put my hand in this too. But he always seems, even though he's the most into Max and like, yeah, the gang lifestyle, he's the most in like, but this is all bullshit, right? Like there's always been part of him that's like, maybe we shouldn't be so involved.
And ultimately, that's something that Max also takes from him. It's so weird the way that like Noodles being like, well, I kind of see me as separate from these guys, is something that Max is like, oh, okay, so I also have to acquire this thing where I'm apart from them and I have to succeed over them.
Do you guys think it was weird that when they all put their hands in and it just showed the over, and then finally Noodles puts his hand in, and then a dog's paw went in there? Like,
comes in.
Airbud,
You're nothing in the rule book.
He's not going to contribute shit, by the way, guys. Let's get to Maxie's. I mean, is it an obsession? Is it like, how many lines does Maxie cross as far as his relationship to Noodles? It feels like he wants to own him and inhale him and destroy him and love him all at the same time.
Yes. I think because when they first meet as youngins, it's a kindred spirit thing. And then looking at the formation of the gang, like to win over like Cockeye or Patsy, it's no big deal. Who cares? These like there's a clear tiering, but because Noodles is always a little bit squirrely, that like gives the desire even more. Like, oh, the reward will be even more worth it because this guy isn't as easy to get.
would Maxie have made some moves in the bedroom if Tuesday Will, the threesome, went down? Like, do you guys think that the love is that sexualized and romantic? There are times that when I look at Maxie looking at Noodles, and I think that, like, he's so all-consuming that he would, that, like, there is a romantic sexual love there.
You always hold out the possibility that you're going to get the Itu Mama Tambien love scene.
Right.
I mean, I think that I would probably say firmly no, because the cultural prohibitions against homosexual relations, especially because where there are more cultural prohibitions against homosexual actions, you find more like going right up to the line, I feel like, because that becomes like the line is so clearly demarcated that it's easier to get up to it. So, like, in a way, the having sex in the presence of each other is a way of reaffirming constantly that we're not gay, because we don't have to worry about seeing each other like this, because it's not going to do anything. But in the throes of passion, when things are really like, when shot and shell are flying, so to speak, I think that, like, you have to leave open the door for that possibility. Like, it is a motivating factor. There is a homosexual component to their relationship, but I just don't think it would ever actually literally push over into, it's homoerotic. It's not homosexual. It gets them all the way there, but the cultural prohibition is just too strong, I think.
Yeah, I think, and this doesn't really cross that line, but I think De Niro characters only do threesomes with Gerard Depardieu, based on the movies I've seen. So I think he was out of the question.
And I think that
contractually,
one-on-one sex with Gerard Depardieu at this point is a threesome. So that's how that works. I mean, do you guys think that? Do you guys think that there's any way that Maxie fell in love with Deborah and then married her once?
Nope.
Yeah, that's not at all.
It was,
I think that they would straight up
the
have
ultimate
sex before that would happen.
It was the ultimate. I chased you away. You're a shadow of a person. All you do is go to bed early, and now I'm even going to get the thing you couldn't get.
And then he found happiness doing that, right? Like, all of his bad things brought Maxie.
And that's why, he seemed real happy at the end. When you hire your ex-best friend to kill you, that's only a sign of true nirvana.
If you're going to tell the story of like someone's whole entire life, basically, it's hard to have it end, I think, in like a satisfying way to the character. Like he's at the end of things. We find him at the end of the movie. He's in the darkest moment of his life. So nothing saved that. Nothing kept that from happening.
God, and there's this way that De Niro just keeps roasting him somehow by just repeating Mr. Bailey.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to put your new name at the end of every sentence, and it feels so stabbing every time.
Well, it's one, it hurts you, and the people who you love the most can hurt you the most, but it's also saying, like, Noodles did die, or Max did die to Noodles.
Yeah.
When he thought he died, he did. So he's like, I'm not letting you say you're back and taking over my life again. Max.
I mean, the end of Prohibition Party is like they have like a second line. They bring in a casket. Like that is a funeral. Like when their illegitimate lives are erased by Prohibition ending, that's really like their legitimate lives being erased because it's like an inversion.
I think the other thing with the Mr. Bailey line that just really occurred to me also is like we haven't really talked about the fact that these are Jewish gangsters. I don't think Leone necessarily has the best handle on what that means, but like to stab him with like the most white bread name possible, Bailey, instead of was it Berkowitz? Yeah, Berkowitz was his
the Jimmy Stewart last name from It's a Wonderful Life. Like that is the whitest name ever. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, I felt like, except for some signage in places and for the realities of the characters' last names, it was easy to lose sight of the fact that this was a movie about Jewish gangsters. And I don't know what more should have been done, but it just like their Jewishness did not really seem to be at issue or discussed or integrated into the reality of the movie in a way that like you would forget they're anything other than, and maybe that was the intention. Maybe it's just they're gangsters. It doesn't matter where their origin or whatever, but it was easy to forget watching it that was the fact of the matter.
So I think in the script, I think possibly in the longer cut of the movie, there's more about the difference between Jewish gangsters and Italian gangsters. Like the Pesci character being representing the Italian gangster. I think there's a whole thing that was cut with the chauffeur for the awful rape scene being an Italian gangster, and that kind of playing a role in that dynamic there. But that's kind of lost. Not the movie we have, but in the movie that might have been if it had been even longer.
But I mean, that
I'm
chauffeur
calling for
does stand
even
out
more
as
of
a
this
character.
movie.
Twice upon a time, Greg. The other thing too is that like the focus, we should have some focus in this movie if we're going to make it 4 hours, and the focus does feel like on one specific neighborhood. If it was made by a different filmmaker, like let's say if Spike Lee directed it, then there would be a shift a little bit to like in between an Italian and a Jewish neighborhood, and that would be where the drama comes from. But I think that like once we get in there, he's so focused on this particular block that's just all we get, Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, the 5. We're about to take 5 classic tropes that have lasted through all of the generations, and we're going to apply them to directly 1984. Not necessarily Once Upon a Time in America, probably the least 84 movie we'll do this entire season, but all of 84, all of pop culture. And Mike, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to start with Robin Hood. What does Robin Hood need?
I think Robin Hood he's a bit of a ne'er-do-well. He's a rake and a roustabout, but ultimately charming and will do the right thing. It's not, he will break the law, but in service to real justice.
You're Donald Trumps, if you will. Oh, is it that not this podcast?
Robin Hood will often fall asleep
Yeah.
at court, farting loudly for all to hear.
Fart up a storm.
Oh, I missed the farting part. There's farting in the
Oh
story?
yeah, There's been recent
The
developments.
lawyers are complaining.
His lawyers are apparently struggling with the smell. I love this
Oh,
struggling.
jeez.
And apparently one of the lawyers is quoted that it was the first time she ever saw green lines that actually mean stink. Mike, who do you have for your Robin Hood?
And all of it is why Harrison Ford is my 1984's Robin Hood. I think he would cover that perfectly.
Do you mean Harrison Ford or Han Solo? Or Indiana Jones?
I have
rather?
someone very.
I guess I would. I mean Dr.
Oh,
Indiana
okay, that's the
Jones.
same as
Okay.
mine then. Indiana
why Indiana
Jones
Jones?
is taking things from where they don't belong, which is in the temples where they originally were placed, and putting them where they do belong, which is in British and American museums of history. Much like Robin Hood was absconding with sacks of gold.
But poor people can go to those museums and see them. So it is robbing from the temple to give to the
Once
poor.
a month, it's free, and they can.
Keith, who's the Robin Hood of 1984?
Okay, so I was a little confused on the categorization here. So you're talking about the actor. So I kind of went with the actor whose performance that year like best fit the archetype. Is that cool? And is that
As long as you make
close
your
enough to what
argument,
you're
you'll
going for?
probably get away with it.
All right, so I'm going to go with, Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. I mean, he's bending the rules. It's ultimately time for justice. He's a rapscallion.
He's definitely a
but his heart's in the
swashbuckler.
right place. Yeah, that too. So that's what worked for me.
I love how when any Robin Hood conversation brings up terms like swashbuckler, rapscallion, roustabout, like all these old school words. We haven't watched Beverly Hills Cop yet, but I think that's perfect. I mean, he's literally on the side of justice, but also the bad guy because he's a cop, I guess. So I'm gonna give that to Keith.
Well, yeah, because he doesn't play by the rules, even though he's like potentially part of the power structure, like Robin of Locksley.
Right. Greg, what's a Jimmy Stewart trope?
A
archetype?
Jimmy Stewart is kind of like an everyman, maybe like a bit of like bumbling in speech patterns. I'm not quite saying everything he means so quite clearly now, but always arriving at like a very kind of like wise or knowledgeable place. I believe Jimmy Stewart is like supposed to be sort of like the soul of America. Maybe not always perfect in execution, but always genuine. And with a wisdom that maybe isn't even aware of itself. And
So like a character painted by Norman Rockwell, essentially.
yes, yeah. And for that, Ryan, I'm going to go with Michael J. Fox. Because at the time, if you wanted to really be like the innocent soul of America, you had to be a dirty neocon raised by hippie parents and ultimately like eschewing all of that sort of inherited love and wisdom and instead going for the free marketplace. But Michael J. Fox has this sort of like speech tics. You like end up loving him even if like what he's saying isn't quite landing perfectly. And he's a little young guy at this point, but I still think it works.
There's something about the Jimmy Stewart character, like when they say, I voted for Reagan, or why did we have all of these kids, that you still root for him anyway.
Or like kind of sexually harasses his own nanny who raised him and now works in his house with his kids and like kind of pinching her butt and stuff. Just like, it's very cute.
What is that a reference to?
That's from It's a Wonderful Life. He's so weird with like,
really?
The family like maid in that.
Ew. All right. Keith, who's the Jimmy Stewart of 84?
I really did not want to go the obvious route here and choose Tom Hanks, who always gets, he is the Jimmy Stewart of every era. But I mean, it's the year of Splash. It's, it's a bachelor party too, but it's the year of Splash. It's like sort of like the young, awkward, like sort of, awkward, well-meaning everyman, a little inexperienced with women, a little awkward around them, but ultimately kind of a romantic too. I mean, just it strikes me as it's a good Jimmy Stewart role, and I think Tom Hanks is kind of. I don't think he really comes into full Stewartdom until later in his career, but he's definitely
Stuart Little
on his way here. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, what other classic Hollywood actor would he be? Like, he's no Bogart. He's not Clark Gable. He's not, Cary Grant. Like, he is just Stewart through and through. Mike, did you have the same thing?
Yeah, it's because I recently rewatched Splash, and he just is playing Jimmy Stewart in that movie.
And if he was Jimmy Stewart in that movie, what would that sound like?
There's a splash.
Is that Don Knotts?
Are they not the same guy?
We should actually add Don Knotts to this list of archetypes.
Yeah, dude.
I'm gonna give Keith the point for that, and for Tom Hanks, and Mike the point for Don nodding everywhere. Keith, what does it mean to be a Phyllis Dietrichson?
I mean, just the person who is going to lead you down the wrong path, but you can't resist it no matter what. And, everything they say is perhaps not, should not be taken at face value. So it's the person who's wrong for you that you can't resist. And that's with a dash of glamour to them, which is why my actual pick is not great, but I couldn't think of anyone else. So I don't really have a great pick, and it's an ugly character from such an ugly movie. But I'm going to go with Eric Roberts in Star 80, who's just the most poisonous person you could meet in that movie. And, just the fact saying one yes to him is what ultimately leads Dorothy Stratton to her doom. I think that character is a little more unhinged and a little less calculating than you think of a femme fatale or femme masculine or whatever in this case. But that's who I've got.
Eric Roberts, Star 80. Mike, who's your Phyllis Dietrichson?
I think you shouldn't go for it, but gosh darn it, you are, and it's Sigourney Weaver as Gozer in Ghostbusters.
Would. There's no way. There's no denying her. Yeah, there's zero denying her in that role.
I mean, Bill, Dan Aykroyd's like, hey, there's ghosts in town, Bill Murray. Before you go on this date, just remember that. And Bill Murray's still like, she's
got
wearing that
it.
dress.
Ghosts, ghosties, bad guys. Okay, good.
Greg, who do you have?
I'm going to go with Deborah from this movie. And it takes a little bit of massaging, but although she is not actually encouraging anybody to be bad, there's a way she interacts with Noodles that is so cruel, because she basically, I don't want to say strings him along because it's not quite that, but the way she will so forwardly be like, you are street garbage and I'm above all that, and then still kind of flirt with him, still kind of lead him to believe that she cares about him. And I think she does care about him. She's trying to get him to shape up and fly right. But that cruelty, that aspect where she seems to kind of delight in being cruel. It fits in with the movie, and I think it makes her a little bit of a femme fatale. And she becomes the center around which a lot of this orbits.
I mean, when she calls him a street rat, and he's like, "Let's not be too hasty," like that's so harmful to a young kid. But that point's clearly going to Mike. It is Gozer forever. Mike, what does it mean to be a Batman?
A Batman is one who lives in the night, is weirdly horny, I would say.
Okay.
Can solve crimes, and
That came-
push people away while doing the right thing.
Solving crimes when you're listing traits of Batman came after weirdly horny.
Yeah, weirdly horny.
Yeah, and it's gonna be obvious with this, and the next one, something's on my mind. But it's Michael Douglas from *Romancing the Stone* is my
Okay.
Batman.
Michael,
I think he could capture the unhingedness of Batman and Bruce Wayne real well.
Michael Douglas, who is part of the MCU, and it just came out that he said on the set of the last film, "Please kill my character. All I want is to leave this, please."
I am so tired of standing in an all-green room with no other actors.
I want to play Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah, seriously, please put me in a costume
But was
next to other people.
Was Benjamin Franklin filmed in the volume? Like, what if that was still just green screen and he had no idea what was happening?
Please, Paris is a place we could just go there.
Greg, who's your Batman for 84?
Dressed all in black, mourning the death of one parent and all but the death of another, and forced to become the very thing that he is afraid of, to channel that fear and point it towards others. Paul Atreides from the 1984 Dune is by Batman. Maybe Jessica doesn't fully die, but like over the course of Dune, he sees the role of her as like the mother figure end. And he's pressed into action, and he will not give in to his own fear, because that's the mind killer, but he will use it as a weapon against others.
And when her pearls necklace dropped into that sand dune, God, one of the best parts.
When he goes down crime sand dune.
Keith, who's the Batman of 84?
So I felt really good about my pick until you got to the whole solving crimes part, which doesn't really fit mine. But in terms of like lives at night,
yeah, just weirdly horny will do.
Lives at night, weirdly horny, kind of a double identity in some ways, weird parental issues. It's got to be Prince and Purple Rain, right? I mean, that's and
Nice.
Hell yeah. Weirdly, extremely horny.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But yeah. But he has kind of a bat cave, you know.
He has a motorcycle. He's got like a vehicle.
Motorcycle.
A motorcycle that probably has his logo on it somewhere, if you look hard enough.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to give that to Keith for Prince, but now I'm wishing, or I want to go back, if Jack Nicholson had said no to 1989 Batman and they went to Prince next, would that have been a better movie?
Oh, hell yeah. That would have started a whole generation of Joker fans a little bit earlier.
I actually really like Jack Nicholson in that movie, so I'm going to say no.
And Miranda Priestley, Greg. What is a Miranda Priestley?
Okay, I have to say this category puts 1984 really on notice as a terrible year for women. Miranda Priestley is from The Devil Wears Prada. She's the head bitch in charge. She has done what it takes to get to the top. And then also, I'm always haunted, and probably a lot of people think about this with her character, but like of the home scenes with her husband and the way in which like you've kind of hated Miranda Priestley all throughout the movie, but then to see her cower in front of her husband is like one of the most upsetting things. It's like, here's this absolute villain, but then seeing her in her own house, you're just like, this is awful. And so looking for powerful women, dude, 1984, like there's not a lot to choose from. And it's a little upsetting.
84.
So I went with who is a powerful woman, beautiful in her own right, and then completely disrespected by the man in her life. And I'm going Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy is a tour de force. She's talented. She is gorgeous. She's got curves for days. All she wants is romance and love. She fucking knows karate.
Mike, go
and
ahead.
Yet,
Mike,
What?
Miss Piggy knows karate. Is there something you want to say?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi-ya!
damn. Okay, there it is. And then ultimately just sort of like disrespected by a man who can't see her true value. I see you, Miss Piggy. I see all of you.
I just want to point out to the audience that Greg invented a new word here. I don't know if it was on purpose, but he said gorgish. Kind of gorgeous, which I really like.
I'm just slurring my words today.
Who is the Miranda Priestley of 84? Did you have the same struggles Greg did?
I did, actually. I mean, I had a really hard time finding one, and I'm not entirely happy with what I've got. But in terms, I went with. I mean, it really was not a great year for strong, big roles for main roles for women. But I went with Polly Holiday in Gremlins. I mean, this is someone who, Mrs. Deagle, who's someone who has a real, has power, exercises it, has a strong, strong sense of rules, and perhaps is a little sad on the inside. I think it worked. I think it works.
She likes classy things like Bavarian snowmen.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be the 7th time we've referenced George Bailey in this episode. She says that she's crying because she's watching that movie, but no, it's because she has so much inner power and force. Mike, who do you have?
I've realized while talking about it that my original choice, later in her career, Kathleen Turner would be great, but her role in Romancing the Stone is the opposite of Miranda Priestley. So very dangerous. If you have to get real close to her to know her vulnerability, scares everybody, kind of lights the world on fire. It's Charlie McGee, aka Drew Barrymore in Firestarter.
Little girl boss.
Do you think that Devil Wears Prada would have been better if she could just light things on fire?
Yes, I do.
You think Devil Wears Prada would be better if she was played by a young Drew Barrymore?
Yes, I do.
A 9-year-old screaming at Blunt and those were so good, but because Mike's was so bad, I'm gonna give both Greg and Keith a point. Because Miss Deagle and Miss Piggy are the best. We're gonna take one more break, and when we come back, let's talk about Once Upon a Time in America. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. What is this movie's view of sexuality and the interplay between men and women? Is it critiquing the sexuality presented to the audience or merely representing it?
Yeah, this is why I've been waiting to say why I'm so grumpy and grouchy about this movie. We get these movies occasionally where sexual assault is a part of the movie, but it seems like an undigested part of the movie. This whole movie's view of sexuality seems to be, and I'm not saying that the movie condones this. I'm not saying that it celebrates this view of sexuality, but it becomes a reality when watching it. Like, sex in this movie is gross. It never seems hot. It never seems enjoyable. It never seems romantic. It never seems sweet. It's often shown in scatological terms, like in a bathroom, in a chicken coop on top of the building. And then there's a couple sexual assaults, rapes that is the bank scene thing. Was she in on the bank robbery, and is that pantomime rape, or is it supposed to be that she gets raped during that and then she starts hanging out with the dudes that did that?
She's in on it, but she did not, if I understand correctly, the rape was not planned. She was in on it, right? I was a little
because he says don't mess with the girl, and it seems to be
and then
she's
she
saying,
says
make
hit
it look
me to
real.
make it look real, and then he goes okay. And then she goes, that's not what I meant.
And then there's a horrible scene later where she's asked to guess who her rapist was. So I thought about the sex in this movie a lot and its attitude toward it. And I really think, so let's put aside the bank scene. I think the rape scene of Deborah is what the whole movie hinges on, and it is the moment when Noodles cannot go back. I mean, it's definitely using that character as a symbol in many ways, which I think is redeemed a lot by McGovern's performance, which is really quite soulful and complicated, I think. But she represents his way out. This is someone. I think the tragedy of his character is he can see beauty in the world. He wants to find meaning and lead an existence of consequence, but he's also got these barbaric impulses from the people around him, and that. The scene is awful and goes on forever. And when you see it in the theater, it is right before the intermission. The intermission ends with him watching her go away with the train. And I have I sat through this all 7.5 hours of Satan Tango, which also has some really upsetting stuff in it. But I've never seen an audience at an intermission be so silent as the people filing out to like, I guess I want some popcorn for the last part of this movie. It's just a completely gutting scene. I think all that is very defensible. I think it is what the movie is not about. It's not like it's not an ugly addition to the movie. It is what the movie is about. I think the bank scene complicates things. I think it's very like sort of that's a little grosser. It feels like more like an attitude towards sex and sexual violence as you see it in an Italian genre film from the era as well. I think Tuesday Weld's performance goes a long way, to like making it more palatable or more of a thoughtful part of the film than I think perhaps it is. But it is that is also really tough to watch, and the way the character is treated is tough.
I almost feel like the standpoint of the movie, and maybe Sergio Leone himself, is like sometimes rape stays rape and sometimes rape becomes consensual sex eventually. And that's the part that I'm ultimately really uncomfortable with. Like a woman gets raped earlier in the movie and it seems to be that she eventually is like, you know what? That wasn't exclusively rape. And then we see a character get raped later in the movie and it's like, no, that was just all the way through. That was definitely rape. And that line just makes me feel very uncomfortable. That's the thing. Like, this isn't necessarily a fault of the movie, but it's something that I couldn't get over and I couldn't stop thinking about, and kind of left me in a very uncomfortable headspace.
Well, I think what's happening.
Unless I'm misremembering, though, Carol never gets together with Noodles after that. It's only Max. Like, she still keeps Noodles at arm's length.
She kind of hates Noodles, and I think that they don't say why, but I think that's why Noodles and Carol hate each other.
Because they're fattening. Like, no carbs. I think that the thing with Tuesday Weld that separates from Elizabeth McGovern scene, which is just so terrible. Like, I mean, this was harder to watch for me than like the first scene of Irreversible, for some reason. I don't know if it's because of its placement in the film or whatever. But the Tuesday Weld scene is like, oh, we've unlocked a kink, like maybe. She knew that before or after, but like while she's getting raped at the bank, it's like it's boys will be boys, but also like I'm giving you this like sort of face or this dialogue that sort of like lets you know that like I'm sort of into it, as opposed to the Elizabeth McGovern scene. The thing that makes that one worse, though, like I think that the Elizabeth McGovern rape makes the bank rape worse. It's just crazy that I'm saying this sentence about a movie, but then also,
but I see what you're getting at, though.
But also the Elizabeth McGovern and Noodle scene when they're old, where she just seems to sort of like do a little bit of forgiveness, makes that even worse as well.
Yeah, I didn't feel the presence of the scene of her rape in their scene when they're older. It feels like that would be something that she would be primarily focused on, like afraid to be in the same room with him. Don't let him back here. Any of that stuff. And instead it seems like she more doesn't want him to know about
who
her
Bailey
kid.
Is.
Yeah, exactly. And so we see this in movies. Like for this show, I feel like we've seen a bunch of these movies where there is a legitimate like rape in the movie, and then it feels like people just don't, like the movie doesn't do anything with it. The characters don't process it. The movie doesn't seem to process it. It doesn't seem to be a presence. It like in the scene where they're both older, it seems like an unfortunate thing that happened between the two of them or something, like an awkwardness like I don't know. And that just, I felt like that had a weird way of not underlining how traumatic and terrible it was. And maybe that's because I'm not feeling the years in between the two events. Maybe there's just other things going on in that scene. But it left me very uncomfortable because it felt like diminishing the emotional impact of a scene which does not shy away from it, right? Like, we've said this, but it probably needs to be re-expressed. Like, the scene is awful. And I think there's something that is doubly awful about the fact that the driver is there and doesn't really do anything. And then you think for a second he's going to like do something, but all he does is refuse to take the money. And I think that makes us feel equally icky that we were just also bystanders and didn't do anything.
For sure.
But I just, Yeah, and I have to say, because of the bank scene earlier, I'm already feeling weird about this movie's relationship with sex and rape, and so it doesn't help that the two exist in the same film.
I do think, and this movie being like, or this scene being the pivot right before the intermission, and everything does feel like Leone's response to other gangster movies that have come out at the time of like the whole movie kind of feels like this is who you look up to. Is this your king? And then this scene is like, if you didn't get it already, what I'm saying, this people are despicable, and how long it lasts and how long he forces you to sit in it is where other films, and they're popcorny and fun and zippy, they really flash away and you truly don't have to deal with it. I think how uncomfortable the scene is very intentional.
You know what it is? A big part of it.
Go ahead.
Go,
sorry.
Keith.
No, it's because the later scene between them the later scene between the two of them works for me in part because I do think so much time has passed. This is someone who I think she senses his, deep and abiding shame for what he's done, even if he's not on a path to redemption. But also all that stuff in the 60s has such a dream-like quality to it. Like, I'm not saying that at a certain point it's a dream sequence. This is all in his head. I guess you could read it that way. But like, it's just everything's just a little bit off. Like the fact that she doesn't seem to have aged at all. Like maybe, it's almost like that's how he sees her at this point. But I mean, it kind of reminded me of when people discussion around Tar is like, well, is it a dream sequence at a certain point? It's like, no, but it's a movie where this, its connection to reality kind of slips a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, movies can do that. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to clearly draw a line like this is where the dream starts or anything like that. It could just be what a movie does.
Yeah, I mean, like Mike said it in the very beginning of this episode about like this is the moviest movie of all time, and that does sort of create this dream thing. I mean, I can't remember a time where a character has a kid and then that kid is played by who played him as a kid earlier in the movie. That is dreamy. That's so arguable as like Robert De Niro's eyes are opiumed up, and that is what he's seeing. Or Leone is just playing with us, like but it adds to this sort of like movie dream-like atmosphere,
All movies are ultimately dreams. So that's why I always felt with Keith bringing up Tar is a great example. Because it's like, well, the whole thing's a dream, so it doesn't really like. Yeah. Obviously, the connection between reality and fantasy has like been worn very thin. One last thing I'll say about this is, I feel like women don't get to be much more. The way the characters are written, at least in this, women don't get to be much more in this movie than just stakes, and that is what is kind of upsetting. Like Deborah seems to represent something more than be her own person. And I think that's what's upsetting about it is because it seems like the bad things that happen to the women characters in this movie are just supposed to be to change the way we feel about the male characters and not to bring us any closer to a realized like image of women.
And I mean, we don't see Maxie rape anybody that I can remember, but when he starts going out with Tuesday Weld, he screams at her to shut the fuck up for 10 minutes straight because Noodles is there. And then later on,
to show that she's like not shit to him.
Right. Yeah. And then a very small scene, but they are making out in like one of the most loving moments of the movie. They're making out on a chaise lounge on the beach. And then Maxie has delivered this newspaper and then just does this hand thing, like, get the fuck away from me. Like, business, it's business time now, and that's sort of how the girls work in this movie. Gentlemen, it is time for Speed Round. And my first question, I feel like has been answered. We're going to do this as fast as possible. Was it all a dream? Is that even like a good question?
I like the idea that the end is potentially suspect, that perhaps we are in the throes of an opium dream at the end. But I'm going to stick with the idea that, yeah, it's a dream because it's a movie.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I don't think it's literally a dream within the movie, but the whole movie has this dreamlike quality that gets a little more dreamy as it nears the end.
I feel like the film bro version of, oh, he was dead the whole time. I know what's happening. He was dead the whole time is, oh, it's all a dream. Number 2, what would your gangster nickname be? And just so you know, Noodles is taken.
Lollipop.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, geez, that's tough. Pizza crust. I don't know.
I think I'd be Calves. Greg the Calves.
We get it. Your calves are good.
You'll never get it enough, Mike.
For the studio audience, just so everybody knows, the studio audience is seeing Greg dressed fully covered, head to toe, except for his calves are revealed. It's just a
Little
black.
peekaboo
Yeah,
calves.
he's wearing calf chaps.
Yeah.
When the calves are what's out.
Little cutout. I have 2 webcams set up. One is on my face. The other's just on my calves.
One of the reasons I love a movie like this is because they have old makeup, and gentlemen, we have the results now. How did they do? How did they do with the old person makeup?
De Niro looks like old De Niro. I was really struck by how well that was accomplished.
Yeah. But he can run in a way he can't in The Irishman.
Yeah.
Or
I
King
really
Guy on
feel
the
like
Curb.
The Irishman is a response to this. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, we finally have the technology to do the opposite. But do we?
Number 4 is
I always say that is the special effects in that are like a 2-star element of a 5-star movie.
I know.
Yes,
Well,
exactly. Technically, you did this. Congratulations.
The Irishman is the reverse of Transformers. Is the drama of this movie ever undercut by the fact that the protagonist is named Noodles? Like, how many times did we hear the word noodles in this film?
Noodles.
No, that's what I love. Like, early on, sure, because you're not used to it yet. But by the end, it'll be completely serious and, like, life or death. And you're just fully bought in. Like, because sometimes a dumb thing you decided as a kid was to be called Noodles sticks with you your entire life.
Yeah, I'm pro Noodles.
It's just early in the movie where he goes to Fat Mo, and one of the first things you hear anybody say is just Fat Mo go, noodles.
I wish that we got to see his tombstone, and it was just noodles all the way down. And finally, is this movie primarily about how awful it is to make and receive phone calls?
It never stops.
Dude, yeah. Anytime someone has to make a phone call or has to receive a phone call, it's like the worst thing that's happened.
I
I wouldn't
say
say primarily, but it's definitely a subplot or something, a theme within it.
I will say, like, I'll text Greg, hey, call me real quick. And then he'll call me, and I'll be like, absolutely not. I'm not answering that.
What are you doing?
We have to take a break. And then, because, as we mentioned before, this movie was nominated for 0 Oscars, we're going to give it all the awards when we come back. Gentlemen, it is awards time. And much like Sean Baker casting the movie Red Rocket, let's start with Rex. Mike, do you have a recommendation for us based on your viewing of this movie?
I do. If you want a sprawling story of gangsters in a Prohibition-era New York, and maybe sometimes even there's Jewish gangsters, I recommend Boardwalk Empire, which I think is a pretty slept-on HBO series.
Hell yeah, dude.
It is great, and also, like, because it's a TV series, it just goes on long enough that it does lionize the bad guys. But I think it at least attempts to say, aren't these terrible people?
And I want to
I
shout
don't
out
need
to
be forgiven.
Perry Mason's partner is Nucky Thompson's brother in that show, and I love that actor, regardless of the fact that I will never, ever remember his name. That's a
Dramatic Steve Zahn is what we call him.
Shane
Gillis. Greg, what's a recommendation?
So, recommendation. All right, here we go. I heard my whole life that this movie, the sexuality in this movie makes me feel so bad. And I heard my whole life that there is a sexy book, and that this sexy book is called Tropic of Cancer. The way the sexuality in this movie made me feel is the way sexuality is talked about in Tropic of Cancer. So what I recommend is if you like sex and you think it's like a fun thing that 2 people who like each other can do together, don't watch this movie and don't read Tropic of Cancer. Tropic of Cancer portrays sex as so gross and awful, and all it is about disrespecting somebody else and finding your own pleasure. Fuck that shit. Don't read Tropic of Cancer is my recommendation.
Henry Miller is an author, as Mike describes Batman. Just like weirdly horny and not understanding what things are. Keith, what do you want to recommend?
Tropic of Cancer is like, I have to find a woman to have sex with even though I fucking hate women. It's like, dude, okay, I don't need to read this. Thank you.
Yeah, I was also attracted to the reputation of Tropic of Cancer. When you actually read it, it's not the book you've been sold in many ways. A recommendation. Well, I mean, I was gonna choose sort of a more obscure film from, relatively speaking, from the Leone catalog. But I guess I'll say this: if you haven't seen the other ones, go watch them, and they're of a piece in many ways, but also very different. But if you are experienced Leone one, if you haven't sought out Duck You Sucker, also known as Once Upon a Time ... The Revolution, which is the middle of this Once Upon a Time trilogy, it's a really interesting, really sort of politically complicated and morally complex film with a lot of great Leone Western action in it. The weird title, Duck You Sucker, comes from the
best title of all time.
Apparently misunderstanding that this was a common American phrase that that would open up the door,
I always
open up
thought
the
they
film
tried
to
to
a
write
wider
the
audience.
title on an iPhone.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. But it's also got one of the. It's they all have these great Morricone scores. I'm sure we'll get into Morricone just a little bit before we're done. But that's an exceptional one too. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Duck You Sucker or Leone in general.
Probably the second best movie title of all time after Darkman 3, Die Darkman Die, which of course in German means the Darkman. My recommendation this week is because of how hard this movie was to watch. It made me think of one person. And so I'm going to recommend The White Ribbon, which is a black and white Haneke movie from 15 years ago, probably, that is just about a town that is so fucked up, much like New York City is in this movie and in real life. And there's no answers for it. Like, the town just starts to flip out. A lot like these people, but why they're doing it, you want the answers, but because it's Haneke, you will never, ever get them. I'm going to give that one to Mike.
It's always hard
on the show.
When your complaint about a movie is like, man, people just act like really awful in this movie and it's not clear why. It's like, well.
Yeah. The other one, the one I almost did is Dogville, because that's the same thing of like, oh, just get people together in a town or on a stage. They're just the worst. Greg, musical moment. What was the best musical moment? And we haven't talked about Morricone at all, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of musical moments in this that I liked, but the one that really struck me was in the Opium Den. They play like what I assume is authentic Chinese music, but it reminded me very much of Brian Eno. It's like very ambient and it's like gongs and it's really slow, and I could see how if like you were high off your ass it would be like a very pleasant experience. And so just that like the Brian Eno music for airports, music for opium dens part early in the beginning I really liked. Also, I'm not a big fan of pan flute, so you have to choose here.
Keith, what's the musical moment of the movie?
I'll defend the pan flute when we get to at the appropriate time. But the moment like the easy listening version of Yesterday kicks in to suggest like it is one that and the phone scene are like the moments I feel like you kind of feel like you're losing your mind watching this movie because it's not wait why are they playing the Beatles Yesterday and this easy listening what's going on? But it's really effective. I think it's really effective as well. I do love that moment.
The only thing that would have made it more like I'm losing my mind is if De Niro looked directly in the camera and started lip syncing the song. Like, that's the point I was at in the movie. Mike, musical moment?
Being a huge defender of the plan food to the point that I've owned several throughout my life because that's the kind of kid I was growing up. Let's add to the devil stick lore.
And we should tell everybody Mike, that you have goat legs.
I do have goat legs.
Mike is an avowed contact juggler.
Yeah, I didn't have friends. I stayed in my room as a kid and did every kind of dorky, terrible hobby. There is whatever little dink in the movie actually plays the pan flute. They're running. It's like sepia toned. There's a gorgeous shot. The bridges between and the theme of the movie that plays a lot is playing, but one of the kids is actually like playing along with it while they're running. And come on, it'll never be that good again. It all goes so downhill from there.
Yeah, I this is shocking to me as well as you guys, but I'm giving it to Mike again for bringing that out. And like, I think that rewatching this movie this week, I realized that the point I'm always waiting for, which happens maybe 5, 6, 7 times in the movie, is for them to cross an alley with like a bridge or something in the background. That's I mean, that's
Oh,
just
yeah.
that's movie making, guys. Keith, pound for pound performance. Who did the best per screen time minute?
I'm gonna say McGovern. I mean, I feel like this is a much it's a harder film. It's a less complicated film with a less complicated performance. I think she really brings a lot of humanity to that character and so much sadness. Like I find that final scene with her completely haunting. Like, we talked about like what happened to Max and what happened to Noodles, but think about what happened with her life and how those years between were emptied out in many ways by what had happened to her and where she ended
just to
up.
know that Noodles is gone, she can be successful, and like
Right.
that's what she's playing. And she was also quoted at some point, I don't know if it was during or after the movie, of finding Deborah to have nothing to do. And so you can feel her adding so much to the script. Mike, what do you got?
Mine is also Deborah, but it's Lil JC. I think it's so easy to watch Lil Connolly in this movie and be like, you're going to be a star kid. What she does with young Deborah is, I think this is the role I should be playing. Whether it's the prim and proper, stuck-up nose, whether it's flirting, it always feels like Deborah is acting because she doesn't know where she fits in this neighborhood, and I think Connolly adds all of that layers in there.
Was it weird that De Niro or his younger self at no point said, Deborah? Were you waiting for that?
Oh, Deborah.
Greg, who you got?
Deborah. I am going with Elizabeth McGovern. I'm going with the elder actress that played Deborah. This movie would be a train wreck if she didn't breathe a lot of depth into this character. It would be just like a crime, basically. And so, like, Bobby D, I call him Bobby. We know each other pretty well.
I didn't know that.
yeah. If you know him well, you call him Bobby. Obviously, he does a great job, and I was very close to saying him. But, like, I feel like without her performance and without her finding all the different facets of the character of Deborah, like, this movie would be very thin.
Well, I mean, Keith and Greg get the points, not just because you picked the same person, but Jennifer Connelly. Come on, Mike. She's in the movie for so little and does almost nothing.
Pound for pound.
It is
Yeah,
pound for pound.
It's the name of the award.
When I saw baby Jennifer Connelly, I also had a message for her, and it was, girl, run. Get the hell away from Hollywood. Get out of here.
I do think that you guys got it everybody got it wrong. It's Burt Young in that one table scene, just so
The pussy insurance or the cock insurance?
yes. And like he's so like dumb but eating and like terrifying, just like effortlessly terrifying. Cringiest moment, Mike. Did you have trouble finding this one?
I try to avoid the movie wants us to cringe, and therefore, so that's the car scene that we talked about at length, the car rape. I think can't be it because that's what he wants us to do. But I do think, as we also talked about, is how intense that one is and how like obviously bad did make me cringe more at the bank scene. And my mind's open to more to maybe it's just complicated and nuanced and how in on it is Carol the whole time, and is it a role play thing? But it just, I feel like I very much know in a hopefully not boring way what the car rape does, and the bank rape just left more of a cringe.
Yeah, it's rough to talk about, Greg.
Talking about movies.
Yeah, isn't this fun?
Were you referring to the later rape scene or the earlier rape scene? Actually, I was talking about an even earlier sexual assault that I don't think actually raises to the level of rape.
Greg, what's your pick?
That's my pick, is an earlier sexual assault that doesn't actually raise the level of rape, but I knew I was in trouble when they're looking for Noodles and they go into the opium den. They go into the part where people are watching like shadow play on the wall, and they think they have found Noodles, but it's just a different guy and a woman, and the guy looking for him has a gun. And when he sees the woman, her shirt is kind of open, and he like he opens her shirt more with the gun, and then he sort of flicks her nipple with the end of the gun. And I was like, I think I'm not going to like this movie very much. And so like that, and like I kind of started cringing there, and I never really stopped for 4 hours.
Keith?
I get it. I mean, I get it. My notes here just basically say cringiest moment. Oh boy. But I mean, ultimately, I'll land on the bank scene. It's just the moment where I feel like the scene you're referring to, Greg, and the rape scene later, the long one later on, are I think they're you can read them as being very much a part of a very thought through vision of this world. The bank scenes, I don't know. It just makes me uncomfortable in ways the other ones don't. Not that they don't make me uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying, though.
Yeah, I think with all the discussion of comparing the rapes, which will not be a permanent segment on this show, I'm going to give that one to Greg because, like, with the nipple and gun thing, that, like, you just feel him on the set being like, no, do a little bit more. You know, like, no, open up the shirt. Like, this is a character that we're not telling the story of Noodles or Maxie. We're telling the story of some character we're never going to see again. What are we doing here? And then finally, Keith, we're going to start with you because you have seen the most Leone, which is more than one. Director's signature moment. What was the Leone-iest part of this movie?
Well, you touched on it before, but I feel like the whole scene with the Manhattan Bridge in the background, where it kind of looks like it could be a canyon in the West. You know, he's really kind of making a connection between different parts of America, accompanied by the score, which I love, and briefly on the pan flute. Like, you guys might be a little bit young to have grown up with Zamfir ads on television. But Zamfir used to be like Master of the Pan Flute ads, like late night television. Yeah. So it's like the cheesiest thing. But Zamfir's track record in movies is Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is a masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
This film. And then the same year, there's a Karate Kid sequence with Zamfir music in it too. So like Zamfir is, and he's also, and they use one of the cues in Kill Bill too. So like, you know, Zamfir in movies is pretty good. So like, I do love the way that score works, how it goes into then like the Bugsy's coming, the whole tenor of the scene shifts. You get slow motion, you get slow motion action, and then you get this moment of high emotion as Dominic dies and Noodles' arms. It is like everything Leone does except. If it had just like a dash of dark humor to it, it'd be like everything Leone does in a 2-minute span of this movie. It's fantastic stuff.
I looked up Zamfir. Can you imagine? I mean, how hard is it for your kid, if you're a parent, to come up to you and say, I want to be a musician? Like, that's awful. But then I want to be the biggest pen flautist of all time. Like, how do you respond to that?
I mean, you got to love your kids no matter what, right?
Ask my mom. How she responds to that.
Mike, what is
and when you find her, let me know because I haven't talked to her since.
Well, yeah, I mean, she split the second you said. Like, there was a Mike's mom-shaped hole in the door the second you said, I want to be the biggest pen flautist of all time. Mike, what's the Leone scene?
Not having all the background. The part that like I felt him the most was the brick transition where old-ass Noodles, don't eat those, throw those out, but old-ass Noodles goes to the bathroom, pulls out the brick, and we do the transition of old Noodles peeping to nothing to young Noodles, and that.
And how little change there was in those two characters, despite the transition. Greg, what do we got?
I felt like I noticed in this movie a lot more steam and smoke than I see in most movies. I think in part it was because that could obscure some of like the locations that weren't quite the right era. But also I got thinking about like the way he films steam against the background of the city, which I am led to understand, although they don't say it, is New York City, and that's one of the big ones. But the way in which he shoots steam and the city together, which I felt like really underlined how ephemeral all the human characters are versus the city, which is like a fairly permanent thing. I mean, New York is in an advanced state of decay through a lot of this movie, but it's also buildings that are like hundreds of years old and people who are like maxing out at like 30 and 40. And so that sort of like the steam rising up in several of the shots is my signature moment.
Beautiful. I don't know where New York gets it all. There's like a steam factory underground or something, but
yeah, they make the steam underground and then it comes up through holes, and I imagine it smells great.
And
oh yeah, you want to just sit in it. You just go to that vent and just stand in it.
And are they using the bellows underground?
Yeah. There's a bunch of what we call them chuds just sitting under there, bellowing the steam right up.
But I did say that the best part of the movie is what Keith said, so he's obviously going to get to the point. And gentlemen, that is time. While I add up these points, why don't the three of you tell me what moodies you think this movie has a chance for at the end of the year? So, Keith, the Moody's are the awards that we give best performance. And what, like, does this movie stand a chance of probably not taking down the whole thing, but getting some awards?
Duo, I could see. Maxie and Noodles, as certainly a thought-provoking duo. There has to be somebody for biggest shithead, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of shitheads in this movie.
Probably Noodles. I mean,
yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of nominations.
All right. Greg, you are out with 41 points, which is strong.
That sounds like so many.
I know, but 2 people beat you.
Jeez.
And
I wonder who.
I'm gonna tell you who those 2 are. Keith, you had 45 points tonight, and Mike had 46. Mike is the big winner.
I came back rested and rejuvenated after my break.
I don't know how you did that, honestly,
crap.
and I am going to make sure that does not happen next week. But, Keith, we already talked about GQ, The Ringer. Where else let's talk about the podcast first. What podcast are you on?
I am one of the 4 hosts of a podcast called The Next Picture Show. It is myself and Scott Tobias and Tasha Robinson and Genevieve Koski. We all work together first at the AV Club, then at the Dissolve, and it kind of started as a project because we wanted to keep working together, along with Rachel Handler, who's now at Vulture. Moved away to New York and left the podcast. I mean, whatever. But we basically we take a look at a new release. We find a classic movie to pair it with. We do 2 episodes, and it's fun. We're currently, the next one's going to be Champions and Et tu Maman Tambien. Which
hell yeah,
go together well. And then beyond that, did you want to know about other stuff I do?
Yeah, no, well, I do want to say that every time I bring up the premise of The Next Picture Show, Mike literally says that is the greatest idea for a podcast I've ever heard.
Yeah, I almost just said it a second ago.
It's great on paper, but the barrier to entry, is like, we didn't think like, all right, our listeners will just have to watch 2 movies so they can keep up, and one of them has to be in theaters, and they have to go out and make that effort. But
this is like our third 4-hour movie that we've done for this show, and I have the same worries.
But I have
it's a lot of fun.
I've got probably 8 Next Picture shows on my phone just because I'm waiting to catch up with the movies. Can you? I want to get to the book, but can you tell us about The Reveal real quick?
Yeah, sure. The Reveal is a newsletter that Scott Tobias and I write. I mean, we've worked together for years, and so we it's. When we kind of pooled our talents for a single newsletter rather than doing 2, and we do reviews every week, and then he does a piece, I do a piece. Sometimes there's some bonus stuff in there too, and it is thereveal.substack.com. There's a free version which will get you a lot of stuff, and then a paid version which gets you all the stuff, and it helps us keep the newsletter going. So we like all our subscribers, but especially the paid ones.
And then please tell me about the man, the myth, the legend, Nicolas Cage.
Well, a couple years ago, I published a book called Age of Cage, and it's about, I always say it's about Nicolas Cage movies because it's kind of using his career, fascinating as it is a fascinating thing unto itself, but also like as a way to kind of look at the changes in Hollywood as, over the last 40 years as he's been making movies of all kinds, of all budget levels, and all levels of quality. So it kind of, Cage is definitely his own distinct person, but it also is a figure you can follow, Forrest Gump like through various key moments in movie making history.
Yes, it's an amazing read, and if you're so young that you only know him as that guy that like put out 6 or 7 movies a year for like the 2010s, please get this because his life, his career is fascinating. One last question for Mike and Greg. You guys do not write for The Resolve. You have no books out. Why?
Keith keeps saying no thank you to my submissions.
When I go to write something, I feel very hot until I stop. So then I usually stop right away because I get like super hot, and then I just I can't do this.
Keith, thank you so much. I'm going to ignore everything Greg said. Keith, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. We really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. And if you ever need a guest again, just let me know.
That's the craziest thing for a guest to say, because usually after doing one episode, they're like, "Fuck this forever." But
especially if they get ripped off and lose by 1 point.
Yeah,
I almost lied. I almost lied because fuck Mike. But He lost by 1 point. So for Keith Phipps. And then Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram.
Oh, I ignore Twitter. I'm mad at Twitter. I hate it. But I'm on Blue Sky, Keith Phipps 3000.
Yeah, Blue Sky.
And I'm on the other socials with that same handle. But when I do anything, I do on Blue Sky. I'm just exhausted by social media. I'm just doing it less and less, and I'm not feeling any worse for that.
And if you're at home right now and not in the studio, like the four of us are, Keith does have a robot behind him named Phipps 3000, and it just does his bidding. And it's a good robot. He's a good boy. For Keith, for Greg, for Mike, my name is Ryan, and please, thank you for listening, and please, as always, keep watching those movies.